The Senate subcommittee on digital assets is working on new legislation that would provide a legal framework for crypto, separate from the House's version of a similar bill. And joining us now, Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis. She chairs the Bank Subcommittee on Digital Assets. And welcome, Senator. It's good to see you, as always. Tell us about legislation that once and for all, what it would be. Crypto would be under the auspices of the SEC, not the CFTC, among other things. What else is in this bill?
Well, actually, the digital assets themselves would be classified as commodities, so they would fall under the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. But a lot of them are bundled and sold by securities. And in that event, we need the superior disclosure and consumer protection provisions that are provided by the SEC. So it's very much a joint effort. Now, the reason that the Banking Committee is concentrating only on the SEC side of the equation is that commodities fall under the Senate Agriculture Committee. So we're going to have to join those efforts and dovetail them at some point. But for now, we're just putting out a framework of principles that we can follow and then move into the details of the legislation.
Oh, okay, so this is just rules, a framework of rules at this point. I mean, it's still, we're late, aren't we? I mean, compared to some countries in the rest of the world, and it's sorely needed.
Oh, absolutely. If we heard one thing yesterday at our first hearing on market structure, we heard loud and clear that the United States needs to pass market structure now. In fact, one of our witnesses said we need to do it yesterday because we are without that framework. These companies have been regulated by SEC enforcement actions, which means you move into a judicial proceeding. It's costing them literally hundreds of millions of dollars in lawyers' fees and not getting them the kind of certainty that they need going forward. So we've got to get this legislation through the system so they know the rules of the road. And it's also important for our excuse me, position in the international markets. Europe has regulations. Singapore has regulations. But they're not exactly tailored to what would be a more robust U.S. economy style of regulation. So we need to take leadership here. We haven't done it yet. And that's so rare for the United States to default and sit back and not lead. And this industry wants to grow and in the United States, and they want clear rules of the road. So they're asking for regulation. We need to provide it to them.
What do you think, French Hill, we just had the chairman on within the last half hour. What do you think is the fate of the Genius Act? What needs to be done to get it to pass in the House at this point?
Well, they also have put out legislation, and the House has done a great job of producing some market structure legislation to come out of the Banking Committee or the Financial Services Committee, as well as stablecoin legislation. And then the House Ag Committee has put out commodities legislation. So they're really ahead of us in terms of their committee work. We're ahead of them in the fact that we have passed through the Senate the Genius Act, which is focused on stablecoins. And so I hope now that they're comparing the stablecoin legislation that their Financial Services Committee passed to the Genius Act, and we can work together to figure out a path forward for both market structure and the Genius Act. Now, I'm not saying combine them, but they both need to pass this year. I know that there is enthusiasm at the White House for having the Congress send them a win in the area of stablecoins. And I'm very confident that the Genius Act that we worked so hard to get past the Senate is a high-quality product that is worthy of the president's signature.
Senator, I know that, just switching gears, I know that, that you were positive or at least supportive of the president's of the action that we took on Saturday. You've said that for years we've heard Iran chanting "Death to America," world's largest sponsor of terrorism. Do you have any insight into, or at least comments about what happened yesterday? There is an agency, obviously, that did some assessment and then immediately leaked to CNN and others. What do you, the whole saga, how would you characterize it?
Yeah, I really think it's too early to know the extent of the damage. We don't yet know whether caravans of trucks that were leaving those areas before the bombing occurred were carrying materials that can be reassembled for bombs elsewhere. We assessed the perfect targeting by the U.S. military of their nuclear targets. An incredible military accomplishment to have fueled in the air, have the Tomahawks fired from submarines, and the timing of all that. That was just epically military science executed to perfection. But what we don't know yet, and it's just premature to say, is whether they could rebuild or whether it would take years or months. Obviously, the Israelis took out a large number of their military leaders and top nuclear scientists. So I think Iran is probably even still assessing its own ability, its own understandings of what happened and how far it set them back.
Senator, if in fact we did not set them back as far as, frankly, we would need to, if it really is only several months, do you think there is a role for the U.S. to play in a military way going forward related to Iran? Meaning, would you be an advocate for additional bombings?
Well, I just think it's too soon to tell. Certainly, I'm very opposed to troops on the ground. I think the president was correct to say that if retaliation by Iran to troops that are in the region, I think we've got about 42,000 troops in the region, would be a grave mistake. It most certainly would be, and that would merit additional bombings. But I don't think that we're to the point where we can actually say whether additional bombings would be warranted later. The Iranians and the Ayatollah got a taste of what we're capable of. I would think that he would want to think more than twice before he aggressed in a way that would allow us to do that again.